The dust hung thick in the fading light, and the air felt heavy with the kind of silence that comes only after gunfire, when even the wind seems to hold its breath. The Navy SEAL team crouched low behind the broken wall, their eyes scanning the ridge. For movement, every sense sharpened by the ache of waiting. Their mission had gone sideways hours ago, and now they were cut off. No comms, no backup, just 6 men trying to find their way back to the extraction point before night swallowed them whole. And from the haze ahead, a shape began to form, small, fragile, limping through the smoke. At first they thought it was a mirage, heat playing tricks on tired eyes, but the figure moved closer, slow, deliberate steps dragging one leg, leaving a thin trail. Of dark stains in the dust, the team leader Holt raised his hand, signaling silence. His men froze, rifles trained as the shape resolved into something human. A woman in torn fatigues, her hair matted with sweat and dirt, the sleeve of her jacket soaked, crimson. She stumbled, once caught herself and kept coming. No weapon visible, no sign of fear or hesitation. Just a strange determination that made Holt uneasy. He had seen this before. Enemy fighters using decoys, wounded bait, drawing soldiers out. From cover 1, of the SEALs whispered under his breath, asking if they should engage. Holt shook his head, but his finger hovered near the trigger. Safety off the figure stopped about 20 meters out. Her breathing, ragged her face, shadowed. She lifted, one shaking hand as if trying to speak, but her voice came out cracked, barely a whisper. He caught only one word. Falcon. The call sign hit him like a spark. He had heard it before on a scrambled transmission 2 weeks earlier. An Army recon officer, declared MIA after a convoy ambush. He had assumed she was dead. Everyone had, but now here she was walking straight into their perimeter, bleeding and alone. Holt felt his gut twist between disbelief and suspicion. He signaled for Jenkins, the team medic, to hold back as he took a cautious step forward, rifle still trained on her. She swayed, then collapsed to her knees, dust rising around her like smoke. She muttered something again, Falcon repeating it like a prayer. Holt hesitated, every instinct. Screaming trap! But something in her voice cracked through the noise, something raw and desperate. He edged closer, just enough to see the dog tags glinting against her chest. The name etched into the metal confirmed it. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, Army. Intelligence. Behind him, the team exchanged looks, uncertainty rippling through the tension. Holt knelt beside her, careful hands keeping his weapon ready. She was barely conscious, eyes rolling back, pulse weak. He could see where the blood soaked through. Her gear, fresh wounds deep, but not fatal. She had walked miles like this, maybe more. He asked her what happened, where she came from, but she could only point back toward the ridge where the light was dimming faster now. Shadows moving that did not. Belonged to the wind. Holt's stomach dropped. Something was out there watching, waiting. He waved Jenkins forward, and the medic rushed in, pulling gauze and morphine from his pack. But before he could start, Collins grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. She shook her head, eyes wide with a kind of fear Holt had seen in men seconds before a firefight. She tried to speak, words breaking apart in gasps. "They're coming," was all he caught. Then she went limp. Holt spun toward the ridge, raising his hand to signal the perimeter, when the faintest flicker of movement caught his eye like a reflection on metal. The sun dipped lower the ridge, now a wall of darkness, and from within it came a sound that didn't belong, the sharp metallic click of a rifle being chambered. Holt froze, then dove for cover, shouting orders as the world erupted around them, gunfire shredding the air. The SEALs returned, fire flashes lighting the smoke, their formation tight, practiced, but something about the attack felt wrong, not like a random ambush. This was coordinated precision fire meant to pin them down. Holt cursed under his breath, realizing too late that the woman had walked straight through the kill zone to reach them. Maybe not as bait, but as warning. Jenkins dragged her behind the wall, trying to stop the bleeding while bullets chipped away at the stone. Holt crawled to her side, shouting over the noise, asking what she knew where they were coming from, but she was fading fast, her eyes fluttering. Half open, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. He leaned closer and caught fragments, coordinates, something about a convoy, about timing. She had escaped from somewhere she wasn't supposed to be and brought with her information. Someone didn't want her to share. Holt grabbed his radio, tried to transmit, but the signal was dead static only. The gunfire slowed just enough for him to hear another sound, faint but distinct, the rhythmic pounding of footsteps, boots in formation, moving closer. Through the dark, he glanced at his men, saw the same realization hit them all. They weren't dealing with random fighters. This was a hunt, and they were the prey. Holt's pulse raced. He checked Collins again, her hand trembling as she tried to reach. For her pocket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges soaked in blood-scribbled numbers, coordinates written in shaky handwriting. He recognized the sector. It wasn't their position, it was the extraction point. The implication hit hard if those numbers were right. The enemy knew where their chopper was headed, knew the route the evac team would take in less than an hour. They would walk straight into an ambush. Holt shoved the paper into his vest and turned to his team, barking orders. They had to move, but the ridge ahead still burned with gunfire, and the woman on the ground stirred again, whispering something else this time, so quiet he almost missed it. Not all of them are who they seem. Her voice cracked, then went silent. Eyes rolling back, Holt froze at the words, feeling the chill crawl up his spine. Behind him, one of the SEALs called out that he saw movement on their flank. Holt turned, scanning through the smoke, and in that instant he caught sight of a figure breaking. From the trees, wearing U.S. gear, moving fast, too fast, the shape raised a hand in the same signal their unit used to identify friendly approach for a heartbeat. Holt felt relief. Then the figure stopped and leveled a rifle directly at them. The realization hit a second too late. The gunfire roared again, cutting through the smoke like thunder. Holt barely had time to shout before the imposter opened fire, the rounds sparking against stone inches from his head. The SEALs hit the ground, rolling into defensive. Positions returning bursts toward the tree line, but there were too many muzzle flashes, too many voices shouting in English mixed with accents that did not belong. Holt felt the twist in his gut deepen, realizing what Collins had tried to warn them about. This wasn't an ambush from locals. This was a betrayal from inside their own ranks. The figure who had fired first fell back into the trees, vanishing like a ghost, as silence fell again, broken only by the rasp of breathing and the crackle of burning brush. Holt turned to check Collins. She was still alive, but barely, her pulse thin, her lips pale. Jenkins shook his head quietly, whispering that she needed evac now. Holt nodded, but the radio still spat only static. The encryption must have been jammed, and that meant whoever was hunting them had access to their comms codes. He studied the ridge through the scope, scanning for movement, but all he saw were the bodies of the fallen insurgents from earlier and the shifting shadows. Beyond them, every nerve screamed that they were being watched, that every second they stayed put was another second closer to death. The rest of the team waited for his call, eyes on him, trusting his judgment. Holt had led them through worse before, but this felt different, heavier, like the rules had changed. He ordered them to move out, heading east along the dry riverbed, staying low beneath the rocks, the darkness settling thicker with every step, the only light the faint red glow of their night. Optics. They carried Collins between them, Jenkins whispering soft reassurances, though she likely couldn't hear. Holt led the way, counting steps, scanning for tripwires, his mind replaying her last words. Not all of them are who they seem he wanted. To dismiss it as delirium, but something about the attack, something about that soldier's uniform, too perfect, too new, gnawed at him. After nearly an hour, they reached a narrow ravine where the riverbed curved into a shallow cave. Holt signaled for a stop. They needed rest And cover. Jenkins laid Collins down against the wall, checking her vitals again. She stirred her eyes, fluttering open for a moment, confusion flashing across her face. She whispered one name. Maddox. Holt froze the name hit, like a bullet. Chief Petty Officer Ray Maddox, one of their own stationed at Forward Command. He was the one who had given them the extraction coordinates he was supposed to be waiting at the pickup zone. Holt crouched beside her, pressing gently for more, but her breath hitched, and her eyes rolled back into unconsciousness. Jenkins cursed under his breath. Holt stared at the cave wall, thoughts racing. Maddox had been acting strange before the mission, keeping to himself, making calls outside the regular briefings. Holt had ignored it, thinking it was just nerves, but now everything lined up too cleanly. The jammed comms, the fake friendly signal, the ambush waiting at their evac, all of it coordinated. Someone had fed their every move to the enemy. He rose and turned to his team, explaining only what they needed to hear, that they were changing route heading south to the secondary extraction point. It would take longer, but it was their only chance. The men nodded. No one questioned him, but he could see the exhaustion in their faces. They were running on fumes, hearts pounding with every sound in the dark. Holt moved to the mouth of the cave, listening to the night, the distant echo of engines, faint but steady helicopters maybe, or trucks, hard to tell. They moved again at first light, silent shadows slipping through the rocks, the air sharp with morning chill. Holt kept Collins close, still barely conscious, whispering in broken fragments, numbers, directions, words that made no sense, until suddenly she looked straight at him and said, "They're already there." He wanted to ask who, but before he could, a single shot cracked through the stillness. Jenkins fell forward, the echo bouncing off the stone walls before any of them could react. A burst of gunfire tore through the formation. Holt dove for cover, shouting orders as rounds chewed through the dirt beside him. They were pinned again, the enemy closing fast this time from both sides. He counted at least 10, maybe more, too organized, too precise. Holt crawled to Jenkins, but it was too late. He turned back toward Collins, dragging her behind a boulder. Her eyes barely open, her voice just a rasp, telling him not to trust command. Holt gritted his teeth, fury and disbelief, colliding as he laid down suppressive fire. His team returning bursts from every angle, the enemy shifting position with military discipline. These weren't insurgents, these were trained soldiers. American. Gear, American tactics. A grenade exploded nearby, throwing dirt and debris into the air. Holt's ears rang. The world spinning for a moment, he saw a shape through the smoke. A tall figure, advancing rifle raised, no hesitation, moving like someone who had done this 100 times. Holt squinted through the haze and his blood ran cold. Maddox, the man himself, stepping into view, calm, focused eyes locked on him. Holt shouted his name, but Maddox didn't flinch. He raised his rifle and fired. Holt rolled sideways, the round missing by inches, his own team confused, shouting, unsure who to shoot at. Maddox called out orders claiming Holt had gone rogue, that Collins was compromised, and that they were ordered to detain both. Holt's heart pounded. He tried to yell back to his team, but the chaos drowned his voice. Two of them hesitated, their trust torn in half by the sight of a familiar leader giving commands. Collins reached out, grabbing Holt's sleeve, whispering the words "proof pocket." Holt fumbled through her vest, pulling out a small data chip hidden inside the lining before he could even look at it. Maddox advanced again, shouting for him to surrender, promising extraction and safety. Holt saw the cold certainty in his eyes, knew it was a lie. The moment Maddox's finger tightened on the trigger, Holt ducked behind cover, firing 2 controlled bursts. Maddox dropped to one knee but didn't fall. His men closing in behind him, the SEALs scattered trying to flank, but the enemy had already surrounded them. Smoke grenades rolled across the ground, white fog swallowing the battlefield. Holt grabbed Collins, pulling her toward the back of the ravine, shouting for retreat, his remaining men covering their escape through the haze. Gunfire echoing like thunder one by one. The sounds of his team faded until only silence remained, broken by the crackle of fire and the wheezing breath of the wounded. He stumbled deeper into the rocks, dragging Collins, her hand clutching the data chip against her chest. Behind them, the voices grew fainter until only one remained. Maddox calling out calm, steady, promising Holt. He didn't have to die, that this wasn't personal, that the truth would die with her. Holt pressed his back against the stone, breathing hard, his weapon empty. His mind spinning as he realized the truth was already bigger than both of them, because whatever was on that chip had started something none of them could stop. And from the shadows ahead came the soft crunch of footsteps moving closer. The cold night pressed down on Holt as he steadied his breath, the cliff edge crumbling slightly beneath his boots, the searchlights from the helicopter slicing the darkness like giant blades, the voice over the loudspeaker relentless, calling for surrender, promising safety. But Holt knew better. Promises meant to trap him, and the weight of Collins in his arms was growing heavier. With each passing second, her shallow breaths ragged and barely audible, but her grip on his sleeve was firm enough to remind him they had no choice. Not now. Behind them, the thrum of the helicopter's engines was growing louder, the rotors beating a rhythm of impending doom. Holt's mind raced, searching for any sign of an opening, any chance to slip away. The cliff dropped steep and sharp into black nothingness, a fall that would kill them both. But in this moment, the darkness below seemed like the only escape from the trap closing above. And Holt whispered in a voice only she could hear, "It's now or never." With a final glance at the glowing eyes scanning from above, Holt lunged forward, pushing Collins over the edge. The world seemed to slow as they tumbled downward, crashing through brittle branches, sharp rocks tearing at their bodies, the cold night air biting. Holt caught the edge of a jagged ledge, breaking their fall, but barely holding their weight, his arms burning with effort as he clung on the sudden shock of the impact, sending waves of pain. Through his broken ribs, he looked up to see the helicopter circling lost in the sudden shadows. Collins lay unconscious beneath him, her face pale but breathing still. There, Holt cursed under his breath, his fingers numb from the cold and strain. But he had no choice. He had to move, and fast. The cliff face slick with loose stone and ice, and below the drop stretched into deeper darkness. Holt scanned the narrow crevice to the side. A faint trail winding into the heart of the mountain he pulled. Himself and Collins along inch by agonizing inch, using every ounce of strength and skill to keep from falling. The sound of shouting drifted faintly from above the enemy, searching the cliffs, but Holt knew the terrain better. He could lead Collins to safety, if he could just hold on. But the pain in his side was spreading his vision, blurring from exhaustion and blood loss. Each movement a battle against his own body. He thought of the men he had lost, and the ones still out there somewhere, and the secret that Collins carried like a burning brand on her chest. They moved slowly into the darkness, finally reaching a narrow ledge sheltered from the winds. Holt pressed Collins against the rock. Checking her pulse, she murmured something about the chip and Maddox. The warning clear even in her fading strength. Holt touched her hand, promising he would finish what she started, that he would expose the truth, no matter the cost. Above them, the helicopter dipped lower, its spotlight sweeping. Like a predator hunting its prey, Holt swallowed the fear and reached for his comms, hoping against hope for a sign from anyone still alive. But the radio crackled only with static, and then a voice shattered the night, loud and clear, Maddox's voice. Cold and triumphant, demanding Holt's surrender and threatening to fire the moment he moved. Holt tightened his grip on his rifle, knowing he was outnumbered and outgunned but not outwitted. Yet he glanced at the chip tucked safely in his vest, the key to everything. The proof that could change everything if it reached the right hands. And then the ground beneath him trembled slightly, a distant rumble growing louder. Holt's heart pounded as he realized it was not just the helicopter or the men hunting them. but something else, something coming from deep within the mountain. Collins stirred again, her eyes fluttering open wide with fear or maybe recognition. She tried to speak, but Holt hushed her, telling her to rest, the rumbling growing, stronger now as if the mountain itself was waking from a long sleep. Holt looked up just in time to see the cliff above cracking, a long, jagged fissure splitting the rock-faced dust and debris cascading down. The helicopter banked sharply, pulling. Away from the edge, the pilot shouting orders over the roar of engines, the searchlights swinging wildly as the mountain began to collapse. The hunters, becoming the hunted Holt, pulled Collins close as the earth shook beneath them, the ledge trembling. Dangerously loose, but there was nowhere else to go, only the darkness and the secrets it held. And as the dust cloud swallowed the cliffside, Holt knew that what lay ahead was far more dangerous than any enemy soldier, because the truth was buried deep, and whoever wanted it hidden was willing to destroy everything to keep it silent. He gritted his teeth, holding on as the mountain groaned and the night swallowed them whole. The darkness swallowed Holt and Collins as the mountain trembled around. Them rock and dust falling in thunderous crashes. Holt pulled her close, his fingers numb from gripping the cold stone, the world narrowing to the sound of their breathing, and the distant rumble growing louder somewhere deep below the ground, a low, mechanical hum began to vibrate through the walls like a heartbeat alive and unstoppable. Holt's mind raced the rumors about Echo Base, whispered secrets of experiments hidden from the world of weapons beyond comprehension and men who vanished, without a trace. Collins squeezed his hand, her voice barely more than a whisper, telling him to trust no one, not even those who sent them here. Holt nodded, swallowing the fear that clawed at his chest, knowing the real fight was just beginning, and as the cave shook violently, cutting off any chance of retreat, the faint glow of lights flickered from below, revealing dark corridors and shadows moving just out of reach, and Holt realized the nightmare was far from over, and the secrets they uncovered might cost them everything, including their lives.